Fadnis ji. So may I request Dr. C. Abhijit Fadnis ji for his address, for his presentation, for his words of wisdom. Once again, welcome all of you. Thank you very much, friends.
Thank you very much, CA Anuj ji, CA Kemisha Soni, CA Jugnu Dubey, CA HN Singh, Dr. Amit Kumar Agarwal, CA Amit Agarwal, who has been coordinating with me, all other dignitaries, and all my CA friends, brothers and sisters. It's a privilege to get this opportunity of sharing my thoughts, particularly on the doctoral program that I underwent, and the kind of interesting moments that you come across, the frustrating moments that you come across, and the amount of learning that one can go through that process. So I think what I intend to do is, in about 1 hour's time, I'll present my thoughts, and then I think we can also have a Q&A. So let me begin with my presentation. Let me share the presentation. I hope you are able to see the presentation, please?
Yes, sir.
Okay, excellent.
Yes.
Excellent. So the title is Ecstasy and Agony of Pursuing Doctoral Research by CAs. And as I mentioned, I'm going to share very, very interesting anecdotes, very interesting experiences I had during this challenging journey of over 5.5 years at IIT Bombay. So what I'm going to cover in my presentation is as follows. How suitable CA profession is for research. That's one part. Second is, what is body of knowledge and how does research contribute to it? Third is, what could be the motivation for doctoral research? And I'll briefly share my motivation also. Then I'll give you a quick overview about the doctoral research process and provide an overview of my research and findings. Of course, I'm very aware that this is an afternoon time, 3 to 5, not the best of time to get into very serious academic discussion. So I will share very quickly some of the interesting findings, as well as let me share with you some moments of ecstasy, some moments of joy in that process, and so many moments of agony that one goes through the doctoral process. So this is broadly the coverage of my presentation. Just wanted to confirm that everyone is able to hear me and is able to see my slides so that I can go ahead confidently. Okay, that's great. Thank you so much. So very quickly, let me talk about how the CA profession is very suitable for research orientation, because all of us go through a very rigorous training and curriculum. As all of us have experienced in the final level, the expectation is of expert knowledge in many topics. So naturally, we have to be ready for academic rigor. So looking for evidence is very natural for us. Many of us are in the audit and assurance profession, and all the time we look for evidence. And research is essentially looking for evidence. So there again, we are we can be very comfortable with research. Taxation and other laws demand our ability to think logically, analytically, and there again, it's very helpful in pursuing research, and more so doctoral research. We also get a lot of practical insights as a part of our training, as a part of our own practice or corporate journey, and therefore we are well equipped to bridge the gap between theory and practice. Also, as a way of our CA profession, we also have developed a holistic thinking, a systems approach to looking at things rather than just looking at in isolation, because we get exposure to so many domains of business. And generally, by nature, we are not, flashy type of professionals. We are very grounded, introverted a little bit, and that makes us very suitable for research. So that's how I would say that, the CA profession, we have a lot of strengths if you want to go for research. Very quickly, let me talk about body of knowledge and research. See, all of us go through a learning phase, which is essentially a contribution from our earlier generations. As in our Indian tradition, we say this is the agama shastra, which means we have got it from somebody else. And then what we do is we assimilate it, we try and express it, we share, teach it, we write about it. We also, when we are doing it, we also sense opportunities to improve upon our existing knowledge. And we also continually find new phenomena like what we are seeing right now. The COVID situation itself is throwing up new business models, very interesting opportunities for professionals. very new ways of doing things. Now that itself makes it amenable for research. So what kind of patterns that are emerging? And all the time new developments are happening around us, like Anuj was talking about, in various industries. And as professionals, we also take up this challenge to add to that body of research, body of knowledge, rather than just be receiver all the time. And we can also make that contribution. And in the process, the other advantage that we can also have is that we get an opportunity to equip ourselves with new tools, new analytical tools, and we are able to make a very meaningful contribution, as Anuj was talking about. So, what could be the motivation for doctoral research? It could be purely professional advancement. For example, some of you who are specialized in a particular domain, whether it is forensic, whether it is Ind AS, whether it's taxation, and you would like to specialize in a particular domain, you can look at doctoral research as one option. Sometimes those who are in academic area, I also find that because it's a requirement for becoming a principal or a vice principal or a dean or a director of some academic institution, people, for complying with that requirement, undertake doctoral research. But that's something obviously wouldn't bring as much passion as somebody who just is passionate about learning. Also, it could be to contribute to body of knowledge, contribution to policy making, like what I'm going to share out of my own experience, where my domain of research was very different than what typically we study as a part of our own practice or in the corporate domain. So I'll give you some interesting flavor of that. Also, in certain areas like social sciences, doctoral research can also bring positive impact. And at the same time, doctoral research is something which challenges us with new learning. And I'm going to also tell you how that is challenging in many ways as compared to our CA program. In some way, we have a lot of advantages, but it also has some differences. And that is something you should also be aware about. So what my experience is, having toiled for 5.5 years, devoting almost 20 days of every calendar month to my research, the quality of work really depends on the motivation and passion, because like CA exam, which is widely known to be a tough exam, even doctoral research, you need to be very highly motivated to take it to the logical conclusion. Often, in IIT Bombay School of Management, we used to joke and say that, unless you get 2 serious depressions on the way, you're not a PhD. Because the journey is such that at least 2 or 3 occasions will come when you feel like giving up. You say, no more. I think I must stop my research here. And then suddenly some ray of hope will arise, and then you will say, oh, let me go further. And that self-motivation is something which is required because of the nature of journey which is involved, particularly if you want to do very serious research. Now, let me very briefly talk about my motivation for research. And I had a chance visit to IIT Bombay campus in 2000 because I was responsible in an investment bank for all the business support functions, and one of them were HR. And my regional management was also saying that why don't we explore the School of Management at IIT Bombay apart from the IIMs, and why don't you visit the campus just to explore the kind of talent. And I visited the School of Management in 2000, and that's when I learned about the doctoral program which is offered there. And in those days it was offered to chartered accountants as an entry point who had minimum 60% marks in the final exam. Now that was a little unfair because many of our rankers sometimes don't get 60%, but that deprives CAs to pursue PhD at IIT Bombay. But I believe now that the rules have changed because I completed it 10 years ago. And now all chartered accountants are entitled. So you can also look at, IITs in your own vicinity and other important institutions and universities. So this thought came to my mind that why not I teach and learn, because I began teaching in 1985 after I qualified as a CA in 1984. So I began teaching, and I wanted to pick up an area where I had no prior exposure. Now, quite often people like to do research in an area where they already know about something. But here I wanted to pick up an area where I had zero knowledge. But at the same time, I was looking at getting big picture understanding of some important areas. And my motivation, as Anuj was talking about, was to see how I can pick up an area which can be relevant to my country, not necessarily for a career reason, because I want to get a position somewhere. And that's how, my supervisor or guide in the School of Management suggested a very interesting topic when we were looking at various options. And he talked about, why don't you study states of India? Why certain states attract more investments and certain states are not able to do so? So, and there began the fascinating journey. So let me now share with you some of the contributions that I could make as a part of this research. When we began this research, one of the objectives was to know from corporate leaders, when they take a decision to set up a factory or when they set up a large back office like the IT companies, out of some 41 identified criteria, factors, which are the ones and how much do they give importance to each one of them. And we were not even hopeful that we'll be able to get 50 responses because we were looking for responses from some of the senior leadership. And I wrote to something like 1,000 companies. And in those days, it was not like anyway, emails don't work. So you need to write letters to people. So we had to do that. And then my panel in IIT said, even if you get 50 responses, I think that will be great. And finally, through persuasion, we got more than 200 firms to respond. And I'll also share with you some very interesting anecdotes as a part of that a little later. Then on those various variables which can have an impact on investment, where we had identified more than 40 variables, I started analyzing data on states. Now there again, I'm going to share very interesting experiences, and I wrote to all the chief ministers of all states of India, and the very, very fascinating experiences which I'm going to share with you. So as a part of this journey, almost 100 variables were identified or observed. And finally, we had to bring them down to 40 and further drop, based on analytical reasons, about which I'll give very quick overview a little later. Then I was also able to use a tool which is often used in operations research, where they try and find out, the input and output relationships and which are the areas for improvement in a process. But here I use that tool in actually study of states of India. So that was again a very fascinating experience. I'll share about it a little later. And Gujarat case study finally. So friends, just for your information, usually doctoral research can be done in any of these three ways. Primary survey, where you actually collect data yourself. Secondary data, where there is an existing data and you analyze it. And case study. Now, I was fortunate to actually use all the three tools as a part of my doctoral research. So that was very satisfying. Now, what is the typical research methodology that one is required to do, and I followed? So there is always this first step called as literature review or literature survey. You find out what work has already been done, because you don't want to do something which is already done. You need to do something new. And then as a part of my survey of companies, first I met one-on-one 14 managing directors. So it was a pilot survey. So I interviewed them, the questionnaire was rolled out, and that gave me an opportunity to improve on my questionnaire itself. Because when my questionnaire is administered in person, it is different. And when a questionnaire is sent by post or faxed, it is going to see a different type of response. So I got ideas in terms of how I need to improve my questionnaire, and that improved questionnaire was sent, as I said, to 1,000 companies. And finally, after persuasion, and some were great examples, and I'll show those or talk about those examples a little later. But there were some shining examples of companies who were very, very serious about responding to this kind of a survey. And I got responses from more than 200 companies, which at that time was 8% of India GDP, which was very significant. Now, you start analyzing this data, you analyze the primary survey data, you then start gathering the secondary data. Secondary data is, for example, the data which is the actual data on states. So, for example, if national highways is a very important variable for a company to make an investment in a particular state, I need to have data on national highways in terms of kilometers and the density of roads in different states. So collecting that secondary data, and not for just 1 year, but I collected this data for 14 years and finally I had to stop because there were some clear challenges in terms of getting the data, which I'll again talk about. And then you compile the data, you analyze the data, you learn some new tools, and then I did Gujarat case study, and then finally you put your thesis together. So very quickly, when this primary survey, again, just to repeat, the purpose of the primary survey was to understand how much importance companies give to identified 41 factors when they set up a manufacturing entity or manufacturing plant, or they're setting up a huge service back office. The questionnaire, after it was received, it had to be analyzed, and there are various tools. Today I'll not go into those details, but various tools are possible, like cluster analysis, factor analysis, discriminant analysis, logistic regression analysis, where you want to find out, how the respondents of manufacturing companies are different from the respondents of service-oriented companies. So which factors have distinguished them? And this is something you need to do statistically. So this is again something which for us chartered accountants, and I must tell you that I pursued my doctoral degree between the age 43 and 49. So for somebody who was cut off from study for easily 15 odd years, for me again it was to begin all over again. But it was a very interesting journey, particularly when somebody in that age group, you have a lot of younger students and you get energy from, and you also can learn from them. Then, as I mentioned, the secondary data is the challenge in our country. Secondary data, what we mean is, as I mentioned, I need to get the highway density. I need to get railway network in every state. I need to know how many flights land in a state. How much is the cargo handled? What is the law and order situation? What is the kind of needs? What is the how stability? So you can imagine the amount of variables which are involved, which can influence actual investment. So you go by the literature survey, you do a data hunt. When you do a data hunt, you start creating a database. I had an Excel database of 50,000 rows. So you create the database, then you find that some variables are not getting data. Then you drop them. You try and introduce some very interesting new variables. Then again, you have to check whether you are getting it for all states. But then there are some small union territories like a Puducherry or like a Lakshadweep or a Dadra Nagar Haveli, where data publishing could be a challenge. So you have to think whether, dropping those union territories, is it going to harm your research? So you actually have to start thinking about it. And then some of the statistical techniques, which you can see in this flow chart, where when we introduce variables in our study, we have to also ensure that they are not already related to each other. If they're already related to each other, then they can actually distort our research findings. So there are techniques. Again, I'm not getting into technicalities of it, but there are ways of dropping variables which are already being spoken about, or the message of those variables is already being talked about by another variable. So we have a process of dropping those variables. And then finally, you can do this data analysis. And now that itself is a very fascinating opportunity for us to learn. Like in those days, I had to use a software tool called as eViews. Now, eViews, even in the IIT system, was not widely used. And I had to import it from US, and there was nobody else who would guide me. So one of my panel members said that the best way to learn a software is go through the manual yourself. So I went through the manual, and the good thing about reading the manual was not just about the software. The manual also talked about, how do you do the analysis? And I'm going to briefly talk about, two ways in which the analysis was done. And the software gave me a lot of inputs in terms of how analysis can be improved. So the secondary data analysis, the data which is already existing, compiled by somebody else, but we are using it, like the state level data, can be analyzed by using two tools called as panel data analysis. Now, panel data analysis has two dimensions. It is not only having time dimension, because I collated data from 1989 onwards, and finally I had to end with 2002, 2003, because even in 2007, a lot of 2003-4 data was also not available. So I had to, take a cutoff of 2002, 2003. But it also had so many variables and plus so many states. So it had what is called as a panel. And analyzing panel data is very interesting. It has its own challenges. And as I mentioned earlier, I also used a technique called as data envelopment analysis, about which I'll also give you some flavor in terms of the findings. So these techniques you can learn, and when I used data envelopment analysis, there were some of the stalwarts from the world who were from operations research background, and I wrote to them and I said, this is the domain in which I want to use it. Can I use it? What are the pitfalls? And they encouraged me to use it. They said, by all means, you should try it. So, you also get a lot of backup from people who are already doing good work in that domain. Okay, so now here is a quick overview about, what my final panel regression model was, panel data regression, where gross capital formation, gross fixed capital formation is nothing else but a measure of investment, is influenced. And this is what the actual data of 14 years across states actually showed, that there are so many variables, right from accidents which are caused by natural causes, to domestic airports, to average wages, to banking centers, to the liabilities of the state, to share of industry and services in the state domestic product, stamp duty rates, what are the kinds of tax benefits which are given. So I had to even study the tax benefits at state level. So you had to factor all these aspects, and you have to think of novel ways in which you could actually factor these variables. So for example, I'll just give you a very interesting way I constructed one variable. Now, one very important thing in those days, now of course last 6 years we have seen excellent power stability in our country, but in those days power stability was a major issue. So power stability was a very important requirement of any investor in those days. Now, how do I measure power stability in a state? So I studied Power Survey of India. There are great publications of the government of India which give a lot of insights. And when I studied Power Survey, I found that there was one interesting way I can construct power stability. So I got data at state level in terms of how much is the captive consumption and how much is the consumption from the grid. Now, if a state has a great power stability, the consumption from self-generated power, the captive power generation would be naturally less. They would go for the grid power because that's more efficient and cheaper. But if you don't have stable power, then you would opt for a more expensive captive generated power. So this gave me an indication of power stability. So that's how you can develop some of the measures of some of these variables, and that can be very interesting. And this was the regression result. Now again, I don't want to get into technicalities, but this was just to give you a flavor of how the final result looks like. And here in the first column, you can see different variables which were used. And I ran this regression on all states other than JK, that is Jammu and Kashmir, all states other than Jammu Kashmir, Delhi and Puducherry, all states other than JK, Delhi, Puducherry and Northeast states. So just to see whether the result of my research or not robust, then start excluding some states, you could actually get some very weird results. You can see here in this table that my results have been inconsistent. Plus signs have been plus, minus signs have been minus, and most of them are on the expected lines. For example, if you see the first variable, that accidents which are natural accidents which have it's an indication of how vulnerable the state is to natural problems. So here you can see a minus sign. I hope you're able to see it, in the fourth and fifth column. Now that indicates that no investor would be interested in going there. Now this is something to think of. This is logical, but actually it actually shows it. All the variables you play on land every airport, and then you have to aggregate it for each state. So how is the traffic, which is that really shows that at cost things happen. This importance which is given to air access, because nobody would like to invest in a place where one can't travel easily. This is intuitively right, but the data also shows it. So I will take a lot of your time. But I also got some unexpected results, and I talk about a few unexpected results. So particularly if you're looking at this table now, look at the four from. You can see stamp as the variable. Stamp duties. With high stamp duty, our logic tells us that investment should not go there. But actually what we find is high stamp duty, higher is the investment which has gone, which is very unexpected. And so when you analyze it, you find that, so I'll just give you a very interesting, anecdote in terms of why Gujarat, which was a industrially advanced state, Gujarat kept on increasing its stamp duties from year to year. If you see some of the data in the 90s, but it kept on attracting more investment. And on the other hand, West Bengal kept on cutting its stamp duty rates. but West Bengal did not get the investment. So this is what intuitively we think, that lower the stamp duty, more investment should go. But that's actually what happened in reality was exactly opposite, because people thought that, they are cutting stamp duty, but there are so many other overwhelming factors because of which I may not go there. But Gujarat stamp duty is high, doesn't matter, but I have so many other favorable factors why I would go there. So, sometimes you get unexpected results, and analyzing those unexpected results is also very interesting. For example, if you see the last but one line, the variable TCARGR, that is about the total cargo which has been handled by ports of India. Now, again, my logic, my intuition tells me that, if I'm very proximate to the port, I'm very close to the port, more investment should happen. And that's how industrial development did happen in India in the British days. But now the data actually shows that just because you are close to a port doesn't mean that the investment will come there. So investment has gone away from ports. And for them, what is important, for industries, what is important is that access to port is important, not proximity to port. So this is how you can actually analyze some of your results, and you can go into more details, and that's a very fascinating aspect. So I'll not go into all those details right now. The presentation can be shared participating, and you can go through those in details. But I'll just give you a flavor. Another interesting analysis I did, which is called as data envelopment analysis. Now, what does this analysis is about? See, every state has a potential, so is this state reaching its maximum potential, or is it far away from the potential? For example, we say that Maharashtra is the number one state in India from investment perspective, which is true, but it is also not fully true, because the potential that Maharashtra has it fully exploited it or not? Has Gujarat exploited its full potential? Has Punjab exploited its full potential? And there are tools which are available. As I mentioned earlier, this is a tool which is used in the operations research domain. There are multiple inputs which go into a process, and there is a final output or outputs. And here I use this tool where the output was investment which has gone into a state, and there were so many input variables. Now, input variables, as I mentioned earlier, could be right from the education access to port access to to railways, to highways, to airports, and law and order, and so on and so forth. Now, interestingly, the software which has been developed by one Professor Holger Schiel, which I managed to access, provides you an ability to actually classify your variables into which are controllable and which are non-controllable. For example, Punjab does not have a seaport, but that's not Punjab's fault. Uttar Pradesh doesn't have a seaport, but that's not their fault, because it is beyond their control. So you can classify those variables into what is controllable, what is not controllable. And because of that, the software takes into account which are the constraints that it has, which nothing can be done about, and which are the variables where it can do something about. For example, the development expenditure, the expenditure that a state incurs, developing the infrastructure, education, health in the state, is something which is completely under their control. In the case, how well they spend it actually is a controllable variable. So this software enabled me to classify these variables into controllable and non-controllable. How far state from the frontier, even boundary, if you're close to the boundary, exploiting your full potential. If you're far away from the boundary, you have a huge catch-up that you can do. And that was a very, very interesting, study. So for manufacturing, I could do a 14-year study. For services, where some estimates are available of investment, I could do a 7-year study. So here, I'm just going to give you a flavor of how this software helped me to rank how states are performing. Now you can see here the region or state. I've called it as region because you can have a state or a union territory. And if you actually see how various states have performed in terms of their potential, here we are not talking about the absolute investment. We are actually talking about how much potential do they have based on the resources that they have, and how much have they exploited. Now, what fascinatingly comes up consistently, if you see the first row, it is Meghalaya. Meghalaya is consistently number one in terms of investment which Meghalaya has got, considering the resources that they have. And look at a state like Maharashtra, which says is the number one state in India. But if you actually see, it will rank overall number 12 if you look at an 89 to 2002 period, it is ranking number 12. Gujarat is again a great industrial state. But if you look at its rank, it is number 10. But look at a state like UP or a Punjab. The impression is that UP no investment happens. But within the constraints UP has ranked higher than Gujarat or Maharashtra, or Punjab has ranked even higher. So what this software helps us to do is analyze what are the constraints that a state has, which are the variables that it can really play on, and how much relative investment it has been able to attract given the variables. So this is a very, very, very interesting and very insightful study. And I encourage you to see how this data envelopment techniques can be applied. And when I was corresponding with some of these authors around the world, they said, we have started applying it in football teams, or now we have IPL. In selection of a cricket team, we can actually see, which team has been consistently performing higher, given the resources it has and given, the players it has, for example. So, wherever there is number of inputs and wherever there is an output, you can always use this tool and see how, you can rank the performance. So this was just to give you a flavor. When I was writing to various states, one of the states which was always very fast to respond was Gujarat. And therefore I was very keen, and in fact once they even invited me, they said, why don't you come, come and spend time with us. So they connected with me from the Extension Bureau of Gujarat, and I spent some time there. They gave me data, they gave me access to some other people. So this data hunt itself was very fascinating. Friends, what people do sometimes is, for data they use databases. So there are databases available. There is a CMI database available. There are many others, India Stat database available. But I deliberately decided not to go for databases. I said I'll personally going to go and hunt for data, though it is secondary in nature, already published somewhere. But I want to see those publications. And when I did that, I studied various aspects which I would have never come across. I was fascinating to find that there was an annual publication called as Crime in India, which has all details of crime, state-wise, kinds of crimes which happen. I would have never got to see it if I had just relied on a database. So that was a very fascinating part of the journey. The industrial policies of the state, I actually, downloaded industrial policies of every state, studied it from tax incentive perspective. This is again a very interesting part, a variable which is something which is difficult to measure quantitatively. How do you convert a qualitative measure into a quantitative measure? So this is also a very interesting part. And that's how I studied various aspects of Gujarat. And I wanted to study the other two states and make a comparison, because Gujarat and Maharashtra were one state once upon a time, called as the state of Bombay, which split on the same day on 1st of May 1960 or 61, and they became separate. So in a way they are twins, and therefore I wanted to make a comparison, and I wanted to study the decline of industry in West Bengal. But my panel said that, the work that you already done is sufficient for doctoral work. You don't now take more time. You can do it postdoctoral work, but stop here. And that's how I just ended with Gujarat. Though as a part of my case study of Gujarat, I also compared Gujarat with many other states. So now, friends, before I conclude and I open up for Q&A, Amit Kumar ji, how am I doing on time? Have I already consumed more time, or I am okay in terms of time?
You can go ahead, sir.
Okay.
We have a time, sir.
Okay, fine, fine. Thank you. So this is where, I would like to share with you the moments of ecstasy, because what keeps a doctoral student going? And I call myself student because when it came to examinations, and everything, IIT doesn't care what age you are from. So sometimes I had students half of my age, but so be it. You have to compete with them. So it's ecstatic that, when you actually go through that journey. But, friends, when I was writing to companies, I must share with you just as a way of some examples of how some companies, I will always remember. So for example, there were a few companies where I didn't even have to send a reminder. So my process was that I would write to the chairman or managing director, as the case may be, depending on how the structure in the company was, send it by a courier or by post, follow it up with a fax, and wait for 30 days. If I wouldn't get a response, I'll again send a polite follow-up after 30 days. Again, wait for 30 days, don't get a response, again do a follow-up after 30 days. And if the company is not interested, even after the next 30 days, stop bothering them. But there were some exceptional people where I didn't even have to send a reminder. And when I wrote to Infosys chairman, Mr. Narayan Murthy, not only I got the response, without a reminder, it came very fast. But apart from that, he autographed on the response and sent to me. So for me, it has become a treasure. The autographed questionnaire is something is always going to be with me. There was no space for signature also, but yet he signed and sent. The other example I would like to give you is Bharat Forge. As a researcher, it was always my anxiety that, whatever questionnaire I am sending, that questionnaire reaches the target audience. So I would send it by fax, I will send it by post or courier, as the case may be. But I never would have imagined that, a respondent would take so much of care in responding to you. And here I'm so grateful to Mr. Baba Kalyani, the chairman of Bharat Forge. So, for integrity reasons, while there was a covering letter which was from me with my address and my email address and everything, but the response was supposed to come to IIT School of Management, for integrity reasons, either to IIT fax or to my IIT email address, or if it was sent physically to, the IIT official address or the fax number. Here was one gentleman who perhaps instructed his secretariat, and I got the original duly couriered to our School of Management office. We got a fax on School of Management office. It was scanned and sent to my personal email ID. It was scanned and sent to my official email ID, and a copy of the response was couriered to my personal address. Now, I can't imagine, such a senior leader instructing his secretariat to ensure that the response reaches to me. It was so amazing. It was so touching. There were many people who responded who said, after your study is complete, please send us the synopsis of your work. And I sent to many of them, keeping track of that. I'll give you an example of a public sector undertaking. It was amazing. Rashtriya Chemicals and Fertilizers. I had sent it to chairman. The chairman, I think, must have sent it to the appropriate department, which actually goes into setting up their plants. And one day I suddenly got a call from RCF office saying that we would like you to come over for a meeting with us. And I went to RCF Mumbai office, to their headquarters, Priyadarshini. And I suddenly found around the table 8 people sitting there. And those people said, what we have done after we received this questionnaire through the chairman is that we have actually distributed to everybody who is involved in decision making of setting up a plant. So our chief engineers, our people who do surveys of sites and everything. And all of us have responded to the questionnaire. And out of the 41 criteria that we have, we are all agreeing on 36, 37 among ourselves. But we have some differences of view among few of us, and we have reconciled those differences, and we are giving you one consolidated response. So all of us don't agree with this response in some ways, but it's our consolidated response. It was so great, right? TCS, when the questionnaire would have gone to them, I suddenly got a call from the chairman's secretariat, and they interviewed me for half an hour, trying to know why I am doing this research, what is my motivation. And once I understood it, next day the response was delivered to my IIT email address. So this fascinating experiences. When my panel was not sure whether we'll even get 50 responses, we got 203 responses, out of which 170 responses came from the CEOs or managing directors or chairmen themselves, and the other 33 came from their one level below. So that was the level of commitment the organization showed. I must also share with you some very interesting experiences with state governments. I think Anuj ji, in his earlier address, talked about how capable the current UP Chief Minister is. And of course, we have all great respect for him. But when I was doing this research, I don't know the name, but there was an earlier chief minister. I wanted to guess. This was in 2007. And, I visited every state's website. I found their exact address where I should send a letter to the chief minister, and I did that. When I went to UP website, I couldn't find the address, where to write a letter. So then I called the CM secretariat. So somebody picked up the phone politely, and the gentleman said that, you can just write this letter to Sushri Mayawati, Mukhyamantri Uttar Pradesh, Lucknow. But I said, please tell me at least the full address, the pin code, the street address or whatever. He said, sir, very honestly, I also don't know the pin code of this area, but I can assure you that only on this address the letter will reach us. Now, I was not sure whether the letter will indeed reach because, if I don't even have full address, I have only written Sushri Mayawati ji Mukhyamantri Uttar Pradesh, that's it, and Lucknow. I was not sure whether the postal department will still reach us. But I must tell you that out of the states which responded in the best possible way, Uttar Pradesh will always go in my memory as one of those top states. And I'm not saying this because you are hosting the this talk, but I'll tell you how fascinating it was. Imagine when a letter has gone to a chief minister's secretariat and it has no force of, right to information or anything like that, right? It is just a plain letter. There is not even a speed post, no registered, nothing. And so there is no even trace of this letter. 2 months later, and I'll tell you what data I was looking for. So I was not looking for any ready-made data. I had spent months and months in libraries. I had spent months in RBI library in Mumbai. I had spent months in an institution created by RBI called as IGIDR, Indira Gandhi Institute of Development Research. I had spent time in Tata Institute of Social Sciences, and I still was not able to. I had got all kinds of publications from the government, but I was still finding data gaps. So whatever data I had already tabulated it. And after tabulating it, wherever there were missing gaps in those tables, only those gaps I needed. I didn't want all the data. But, and there were some 8-10 sheets. So I was not hopeful whether anybody will be able to keep track of all those 8-10 sheets because the data was so different. In one sheet, I'll have data on, the number of aircraft landed in Varanasi and airport. Those days. So there was so much difference in data, education data, this data, that data. So I was not sure how any state will keep track of it. But suddenly 2 months later, I got a letter from UP CM Secretariat. And one of the tables was sent to me saying that this is the data we have been able to obtain and this is sent to you. I said, wow, somebody is keeping track of my letter. 2 months later, I got another letter. Again, one data sheet was enclosed saying that we have been able to get this data and we have sent to you. But the third response I got from UP was absolutely amazing. And the third was data now, all of us know that now we have report authority of India. Prior to 1994, we had two authorities. One was domestic airport authority, the other was international airport authority. And so data publishing was not done by those two authorities from efforts. The data has been very great authority of India. Prior to 95, later in 2006, 2007, you can imagine how fast I was looking for. And I was looking for 88, 89, etc. CM Secretary actually sent a letter to Varanasi and Lucknow airports. And they said that there is a researcher in IIT Bombay who is looking for data statistics on your airport. And those airports compiled that data, sent to the CM Secretariat. You can imagine. And CM Secretariat took the trouble of sending it to me. We say that, governments don't work. I don't believe that. Governments work so well. And for a researcher's sake, if a government can bend so backwards, I think, for common people also they're trying to do. Of course, we have huge constraints, but within that they try and do. Maharashtra government again, I suddenly got a call from a sales tax officer And I said, I have nothing to do with sales tax, and why is the sales tax officer calling me? He said, the CM has received this letter. It has now, because I was also looking for sales tax deferment data, sales tax exemption data, so that had gone to sales tax office. And there was one gentleman who called me up saying that, this table has come to me, but, we don't publish data in this form, but we publish data in some other form. I'll give you all those details. And here is my phone number. If you have any difficulty, call me. And again, I got data from Maharashtra. I got excellent data from Gujarat. They even called me. So there are these great examples. And there was one state, however, I don't want to name because it was a little disappointing. When I asked for data, the response came from the state government saying that it is the responsibility of researchers to compile data on states. It is not the responsibility of the state itself. So I was amazed because I would imagine that for a state to govern, it needs to have its own data. But if they're saying some researcher should compile data, then how are they going to govern the state? And if it's a very small state, then that should not be an attitude. But so be it. I'm just sharing this interesting experience. See, we all know that CA exam is not easy. We have all gone through a very rigorous curriculum. It's challenging. But the more challenging aspect of a doctoral research is that at least for CA exam, we have a defined goalpost. We have a defined syllabus. We have a lot of course material available. We have, today videos and audios and all kinds of tools available, right? For doctoral research, the goalpost itself is something that you are creating. The goalpost sometimes evolves. Sometimes it keeps on shifting. Sometimes it keeps on evading you. Sometimes you start getting worried whether, you are able to, will you be required to study because you invest so much of time. In investment bank, in other business, to IT, to finance, to legal. When I decided to give up for study, I had $1 salary sitting in India, and then you start all thinking about, what is that I have given up? You can have so many challenges, and data challenging at 12 case. It was the year of Lehman Brothers crisis, and after crisis on investment. So that you need to cope up while you are pursuing this work. And also the challenge with data publishing, like particularly as I told you, even in 2008, I had difficulty on getting road statistics on all states of India, even as far back as 2002, 2003. So even in 2008, I had to end my analytical study with 2002, 2003 data, because unless you have sufficient data, you cannot analyze. So, and again, even with some gaps, you are required to do interpolation, but, you have to maintain integrity of your data. You need to have documentation of what you have interpolated. You need to document it, all your sources of data, and so on. So, sometimes you may also find that there's nobody else who is willing to teach you that technique, like that e-reviews, software. And sometimes those can be agonizing. So sometimes you can get worried whether I'll be able to cope up and manage. But then, if you have that motivation, if you have that grit, that then, I can, in spite of all challenging situations, you get, some way out. And Dr. Amit Kumar is in this, he can vouch for what I'm saying, that you can always get some energy from somewhere, you can get some road from somewhere, right? So in spite of all the other priorities, there and the personal uncertainties, the challenges that are long paths, you need to be prepared. But then at the end, if you have done good work, and this is something I must also share with you as a part of Ecstasy, if you have done hard work, when your research goes for external review, as per the IIT regulation, I'm sure that is the regulation in most other universities in India, it has to go to two external reviewers who don't know you, and two within India and one abroad. If your quality of work is good, if you have done excellent work. So, for example, after I submitted my research in IIT in June 2009, by August, I had got all the three reviews. And one of them even accepted it without even making a single suggestion. That was a great compliment. And two minor suggestions, suggestions. So my Viva happened in just 3 months flat from my submission. This is something that can happen. That's a matter of necessity for us. That whatever 5.5 years you have put in, at the end, you actually got the recognition that there was a high quality of work. So friends, before I conclude and I get into Q&A, I will also very quickly give you, I think I have a slide on that. I'll just quickly see if I have. But otherwise, I'll just tell you from my memory. Yes, so this slide I think I had skipped. So I'll just very quickly tell you what typically involves in a doctoral research process. And I'm telling you from my IIT experience, some of the details may differ from university to university. So first is you need to zero in on your own area of interest. So that depends on your motivation. That depends on, what you want to use, how you want to use that research, whether professionally, academically, how it is. Then you need to start looking for faculty who may be interested in your area of research, who may be willing to, work with you. Then check your own eligibility. Now, fortunately, as I understand, you can explore that on IIT Bombay's website. But as I understand, IIT Bombay is now accepting all CAs irrespective of the percentage. That's my impression. In those days, it was only 60% and above. But now I think it's available for CAs, and people who are in the vicinity of IIT Bombay or any other IIT should take advantage of that. Check your eligibility and selection process. Then typically once you are selected, you have to go through what is called as coursework, where certain minimum teaching you need to attend, because you need to be trained in econometrics, you need to be trained in research methodologies and some of the other tools that you're going to use as a part of your research. Then you agree with your guide about the overall research plan. Then in the IIT system, we are required to give an annual progress seminar. We call it as APS every year to the thesis supervisor and your other panel members. You give a presentation of how much you have progressed. They give you suggestions. Then there are certain requirements of papers, publishing, attending conferences. And then once you come to the final stages of your journey, and when you think you are ready with your thesis, in IIT we have what is called as Pre-Synopsis Seminar. So before you actually submit your synopsis and thesis, you have to give a pre-synopsis seminar, which is like your final annual progress seminar. And then the panel feels that you are ready. You need to do some additional work in next 1 month or 2 months, and then you are ready. And then you get about 4 months time to submit your thesis and synopsis. Then it goes for external examination, as I told you. And then you have what is called as defense or viva voce, different universities may call it. And then finally it is accepted. So moment it is accepted, like in IIT system, even if you have not got the formal degree in the convocation, once you have done all the academic requirements, you immediately get a provisional certificate the very next day, and you can put the coveted words PhD or doctor behind your name. So I thought in the time that was available, I hope Amit Kumarji, I have been able to manage my time well, and therefore
Yes, sir.
I hope there will be sufficient time for Q&A.
Thank you, sir, for your nice deliberation on the topic, and it was really very insightful that our own member has shared his journey while as a student of doctoral pursuing PhD through Bombay IIT. And it was quite interesting to know your experience, and we are quite confident that our viewers know what are the problems and challenges faced by a chartered accountant. One of the most common problem is equivalency of the chartered accountancy with PG, because as per UGC norms, the bare minimum qualification is post-graduation in any subject.
Right.
But we are fortunate enough that CA is now being treated as postgraduate qualification, not only in India, but by NARIC also. Globally, it's known as a post-graduation qualification. And this minimum pass percentage required for applying in the doctorate is now, as per UGC norm, it is 55%.
Okay.
So it is 55%. So, sir, I would also add something with the permission of the chairman. Chairman, sir, should I continue or should I share my experience? Yes, sir.
Yes, yes.
Sir, this year, under the able guidance of chairman and vice chairperson, ma'am, we started some initiative. We taken some initiatives, and under this initiative, we more and more focus on how to build the capacity to our members for pursuing doctorate and to do some to take a research assignments. So it is a common question being asked by the members that yes, it's good that a person who want to make a career in the academics need a doctorate or research experience. But why it is required in the a member who is in practice? But through your deliberation, through your research experience, you yourself told, you enlighten us that for academics it is a requirement, but for a practitioner it's a need. Rather, it's more required to a practicing chartered accountant, because if you are more and more in research, if you are applying towards the research, and if you are having that much of experience in the research and you have interest, you would be in better position to guide your client. You are in better position to help your management to take appropriate decision. Like, through your, because there is a general perception that if there is a lesser amount of the taxation, more investment can be taxed. But in your research, you yourself found that in West Bengal there was a lesser number of the taxes, but other constraint was there, and comparatively Gujarat, yes. So, sir, I would request you to please allow.
Sure. So I think that's a very important point. And as a part of my own presentation, I talked about stamp duty as, one of the variables. But, you're very right that it is not only the stamp duty, but it is the backward area incentives which were given by states. So that also is something that I studied as a part of the state's industrial policies. And here again, something interesting which came up, and you very rightly pointed out, that, quite often we think that if states are able to give more, incentives, investment will actually flow there. But what actually has been found by states themselves, and this realization came to them in 1999, when they realized that, it is like a zero-sum game. If you start competing with each other, giving more and more backward area incentives, in the process what happens is, some other state will always be able to beat you by giving more incentives. And in the process, your state revenue starts declining. So my research also showed that investments actually doesn't go to states which are offering more aggressive backward area incentives. Because there is this feeling that because the area is backward, I don't want to go there. Right? Because one of the important aspects, and you have very rightly touched upon this, and thanks for touching upon this, because one of the things which also came about is it is not just sufficient to get tax incentives, but do you have access to high quality talent? Is high quality talent going to come and stay in the area where you are making the investment? Right? Is there access to high quality education around? Otherwise you set up a factory in an area where people cannot even get access to high quality education. It can become a challenge. So some of those factors can become more dominant, and therefore I had to also devote a lot of time in terms of studying education availability in different states, and not only primary and secondary education, but even I remember I studied the AICTE website in terms of how many management institutes they have given approval state-wise, and from which state, in which year was it given. So I remember I tabulated that whole data, because, for me, access to education of high quality was also very important. Because otherwise, for me to research whether investment has really gone to those states where high quality education access was available. So I had to collate that data. Now, obviously, data on how many students were there, etc., was not available, but at least I could get how many institutions are there in each state, in each year. So, you touched upon a very important point that sometimes what happens is when we get focused on only one variable, and say that, you give more incentives, then the investments will naturally happen there. But the study that I did actually tried to link so many variables together. And, as I said, more than 100 variables I explored, dropped 60 on the way, finally about more than 40. But when you start using analytical tools, you find that some of them are already correlated and you need to drop them to avoid what is called as multicollinearity problem in research. So you have to drop some of those variables. And I must also tell you, sometimes, you can also get absurd results. Intuitively, we all would agree that a state which has a better law and order situation will get more investment, right? This is very natural, that any state which has a better law and order will get more investment. Now, how do I measure law and order? It's a problem. Now, I can intuitively say that law and order is a very important variable, but that's such a qualitative variable. How do I convert that into a quantitative variable? So when I started looking at crimes in India as a publication, I looked at the crime data state by state. And when I actually used it in my study, I started getting absurd results, where I started finding that states which had high crime rates were attracting more investment. Now that was completely absurd, right? So I wrote an email to National Crimes Bureau in Delhi, saying that, I've been using this data which you have published in Crimes Bureau, and when I'm using the crimes data, I'm actually getting absurd results. And luckily, I found somebody from IIT, one Dr. Nandakumar Saravde, who was from National Crimes Bureau. And when I wrote to him, then he told me the problem with some of the data publishing. So then he explained to me that you may find that the crime rate is very high in some states. But he said, remember Abhijit, crime rate is high in those states because crime is recorded. Now this was such an insight. So that, because crime is recorded, there is a high crime rate. But there are states where crime is not recorded, though it has happened. And in the books, in my crime report of every year, it will show low crime rate. And therefore, when we looked at the absurd results from that variable, we had to drop that variable. And therefore, in my doctoral research, I had to say why I have dropped this variable. So, this is another very interesting thing that happens as a part of the doctoral research, that you need to justify why a variable was added and why a variable was dropped, because it is not random. Of course, we are finally doing it within the finite time that we have, and the finite resources that we have, and finite data which is published. But within that, we should not leave any stone unturned in terms of exploring whether that is making sense or not. So then you can justify and say that this is the logic because of which we are dropping this variable. And then the panel data analysis, which was showing absurd results to me, started showing sensible results, because that is the way so statistics can reveal and statistics can hide also, as we always say, right? So this is what the situation is. So thanks for raising this question, because I think with that I could give you more flavor about how researchers can look at data.
Yes, sir. Statistics has its own beauty and some limitations.
Correct,
because
correct.
if you go by the temperature of Churu, and if you take the average of Churu, it is 49 and sometimes it is -2. Then it's the most pleasant weather if we go by the statistics and the average. So it's the most pleasant, but it is the person who lives there know the pleasancy of that weather in Churu,
correct,
one of the remote desert district of the Rajasthan. So this is the beauty of the path, but there in statistics there are certain tools by which you can check the normalcy of the data.
Yes.
So, sir, I would like to share with you that under the able guidance of the chairman, research committee, this year we brought out a handbook on how to use statistical tools in business research analysis, a beginner's module. It was written by me and one of the professor. And first we wrote that book. Then we have conducted a 5-day program. It was overwhelming response. Only 50 seats were there and we received around 250 emails to participate. It was a beginner's module. Then we will have a advanced. So the coursework required. So what we are doing, we are trying to build a capacity of our members. We are trying to build a course, a certificate course, which can be used as a coursework for doctoral students. So
Right.
that way, committee and the institute is trying to build the capacity of our members, because we
Right.
have one publication keeping in the mind that the limitations of our member and the strength of our members. So that customized document we have prepared. One training program we have already done. Now we are in pipeline to introduce an advanced course. Then based on the experience, we will revise it and we will have a certificate course on that will be served as a purpose of coursework for doctoral students. So
Right.
that way we are facilitating, and with the able guidance of people like you and the other one, Dr. Achinto from Australia, he is the head of Deccan University in business research, and other colleagues, professors from our own fraternity. This year we are trying to build the capacity of our members. So this doctoral scheme is one of the scheme. I would urge to all the viewers and you also, sir, that motivate our members, because in the beginning of the year, President sir, Vice President sir, Chairman sir sit together. They discuss a lot that what are the problems, why chartered accountants are not pursuing the doctorate. So it was observed and felt that after passing the CA, the members want to go for a job or some practice. So it's an opportunity lost to them if they go for a doctorate. So keeping in view that to foster the to help them out, we introduced this doctoral scheme for our meritorious members who want to pursue doctorate. Because if our member every year, if we sponsor five people, then in down the line 10 years, we would have very good researchers with us who can help us. Our members is having, as you rightly said, our chartered accountant, because why doctorate is a very, very easy task for our members, because they are analytical in there. They are doing research every day. They are reading. They keep themselves updated. We have CP program system. This is the only, I think, this is the only profession we have the continuous education profession. So this is the beauty of our profession, and research can be complemented through our attitude, our aptitude, and our aptitude. Our institute is trying to, for our senior members who has acquired a great amount of experience in the research and particular subject, we are fostering their, we are motivating them that they should devote some time, they should groom, they should transform the knowledge to the younger people. By way of research project scheme, through which we are not providing any honorarium to the researcher, but we are providing the assistance for compensating the salary or perks paid to the research associates and other team members, travel and other things. By way of these 2-3 schemes, this year we tried our level best to tap all the areas of the research. And with the able guidance of you people, and definitely we have a group at Mumbai also, and other part of the country also we will have. So, sir, I would request you to please guide us how to our younger members can approach IITs and IIMs for their because we have one Professor Sobesh Agarwal in IIM Ahmedabad. I requested him to please guide our members. And you also having vast experience in your dealing with the IIT Bombay and other professors also. So can you guide us how our members can pursue their doctorate in IIMs, IITs and big schools or universities, good quality schools. So can you guide us, sir?
Sure, of course. So, I would answer it in two ways. So one, as you rightly said, CAs who have just qualified and who are looking at various career options can surely think of, academics as an option. I must mention here that you must have read this news just 3 days ago that Harvard Business School's recently appointed dean, right, is a chartered accountant from India. Of course, he has pursued his PhD from US later on, but he is a chartered accountant and then IIM Bangalore, alumnus as well, and then went to Stanford. So, so basically, Professor Datar, who has recently been appointed as the dean, so that's an example where youngsters, just like we look at, the profession of, say, going into a corporate or practice, we should also look at academics as an area, and that's where, as Amit was talking about, after CA, pursuing doctoral research could also be an excellent option for our young members. The other thing I would also say is like what I did. I had, by the time I was 40, 41, I had already reached a senior level in the corporate world, right? But I was a little tired of, the high pressures of corporate life, and I needed to do a work-life balance. I wanted to teach and I wanted to learn. And that is an age, again, when you're in your 40s. So some of our, relatively more senior members, can also start thinking of whether they can, look at a mid-career shift. So apart from, having worked in the corporate, which is a very valuable experience, if, for example, and I'll tell you, when first time I met the head of the School of Management at IIT Bombay in 2001, when I started looking at this option, he in fact offered to me that since you already have 16, 17 years of corporate experience, we are very happy to give you an adjunct faculty role, with the condition that you actually should start pursuing PhD with us. And then once you demonstrate your abilities, you can become an associate professor and then a full professor. So that's a career option which is available even for mid-career professionals, and that's something which they can look at. And particularly, I must also say that apart from the typical MBA programs which are offered by various schools, like IIMs or even IIT School of Management, and say, for example, IIT Chennai has Department of Management Education, which is offering their own 2-year degree program. Now, this is where, obviously the kind of faculty members who go are those who come from purely academic background. But we also need faculty members, particularly because executive education is also picking up in a big way. For example, I had helped IIT Bombay in launching an executive MBA program jointly with an American university. And the faculty members who teach in that program are faculty members who are not only great as faculty, but who also have tremendous amount of either corporate or consulting experience. And this is where, people who have already had a very good professional track record, either in practice or, in corporates, can think of this mid-career shift. And you can use your knowledge to start teaching others and start sharing it. And that's where, I would also encourage young chartered accountants. And that's where I personally found value myself, is that like Anuj, I also became a cost accountant and chartered accountant when I was just 21. But 22, I began teaching. I began teaching management courses. And even if, for example, you're not right now able to pursue a doctoral program right now, I would encourage you to start teaching, at least for some course. Because once you start teaching, what happens is your own concepts become clearer. For example, when I started teaching standard costing, though I was already a cost accountant and a chartered accountant, when I actually taught standard costing, my concepts of standard costing became far clearer when I had to teach in a class. And then I even developed a new method of how you can use standard costing, rather than a simple formula kind of approach, how you can logically. So some of these things, we refine our abilities also, by teaching. And therefore, I would encourage our young members, to at least start teaching a course. It may not be a big academic institution. It could be a small academic institution. Doesn't matter. But start teaching, because then that also starts kindling interest in research. And even if, for example, for financial reason, you feel a corporate career or a career in practice is more compelling, but at least, you have that option at some stage. And starting to teach also, apart from developing your research interests, also helps in your own personality, because then you are able to share what you know. And this is a very valuable technique, that, being able to share what you know. So this is something I would encourage my young CA friends, to actively pursue it, even if, say, for example, right now, they are not able to pursue doctoral research straight away. And mid-career shift is something our members should actively look at. That's how I would say.
We have certain questions from the members.
Yes, please.
That which are the universities which is allowing chartered accountants for. So it is members. It is available at ICAI website, and you write us at research@icai.in. We will provide you the exact link. At the board of studies take care of this function, and we have a list of the universities which have allowed the chartered accountancy as the one of the equivalent to PG for pursuing the doctorate. Another thing that where it is this chartered accountancy as a post graduation, it's a notification of the NARIC. Again, you write us at research@icai.in. We will provide you the link from where it will be useful. It was floated in the social media around 4-5 months back, a very beginning stage of the lockdown first. It was in social media that NARIC has allowed us as a post-graduation. Even our intermediate course is treated as equivalent to graduation. So that notification also we will share with you through email. And other thing is what are the contents? What should be? I think from the question I could understand that please suggest some research proposals. So I think not research proposals. They are asking what should be the flow of a research proposal. So I would request to sir, please enlighten the members. What are the basic things which should be there in a good quality research paper?
Research paper or proposal?
Research proposal.
Proposal. Okay. Okay. So essentially, when we are writing a research proposal could be for a variety of reasons. One is like there could be funded research, like what Anuj was talking about, or Amit was also talking about, that you may be writing a proposal for the purpose of getting funding for your research, or it could be a research proposal for the purpose of a doctoral research, right? So finally, one of the most important things that where research is done, like what I was earlier talking about, how does body of knowledge get developed? Body of knowledge is a result of what our previous generations have put in efforts, and what we have an opportunity to contribute now is in the context of the current scenario as it is evolving, as it is changing, as it is throwing new opportunities. There are shifts which are happening, and that's where the research opportunities come up. So research proposal is essentially what? Research proposal is for us to make a case that this is an exciting area of research, whether it is for funding or whether it is for... So therefore, typically what we are required to do is at least do, while you may, as a part of your actual research, you may do far detailed analysis of what is the previously done research work, but at least you need to be aware about, what is the research which has already happened, because otherwise it should not so happen that you put a proposal and they respond back to you saying that, hey, this is already researched on so widely, so there is no opportunity, right? So that diligence we are required to do. Now, within that broad domain knowledge or domain area, we also need to identify which is the area which is specifically of interest to us. And what is the expanse? So research proposal is also about, the broad area, the specific area where you want to do research, as well as its expanse, because, how far you want to go in that research, because sometimes it could be an ocean, right? And typically, which are the research problems? At least some preliminary understanding of research problems that you would like to address. So at least, that shows a reader your own thinking process about how much diligence you had done. Because nobody would actually accept your proposal for research unless they are convinced that you have done enough diligence. Quite often what happens is the research proposal is so sketchy that it shows that, the would-be researcher is not willing to really go extra mile to show the seriousness with which research is required to be conducted. And still, the funding is required, or, somebody should accept that person for doctoral research. So that doesn't happen. So therefore, your study, though of course research proposal is going to be short, your study should get reflected saying that, these are the areas where gaps are clearly visible, and that's where, or new challenges have come up, and that's where the opportunity exists. So which are the research questions you would like to address should also be, at least some preliminary deliberation should be indicated in your research proposal. Amit ji, would you like to add anything to that from your own experience? Or have I covered broadly?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir, for enlightening. And there are certain other questions which are common in nature. I would like to answer them. One is that one of the member has done their PhD from Pune in rural development or some cooperative. So how it is related to profession. So dear member, I would like to share with you that I myself did my PhD 15 years back in one of the World Bank projects. And the recommendation these recommendation suggestions were incorporated and one department was formed in the government of Rajasthan based on that recommendation. So every piece of the research is related because chartered accountants are the part of the society. The Institute of Chartered Accountants of India is the partner in nation building, and each and every thing of the nation somehow directly or indirectly is connected with our profession. Even sometimes it happens that your chartered accountant, a businessman's chartered accountant know better than their family members. So any piece of research, every work done by our chartered accountant is useful. So you can share your research work with us, and we can see how we can use it, and we can recommend. Sir, you would like to say something? You are on mute, sir. You are on mute.
So you have very rightly answered that question already, but I just wanted to add one more aspect for the benefit of particularly our younger members. See, there are two things in any doctoral research. One is a domain in which you are researching, right? And as this question was that, somebody has researched in cooperative and how one can use it in profession, right? So that is one part. But the second part also is that when you do research, you equip yourself with so many skills, and therefore we always should remember what I call as portability of skills. You have developed certain skills. It may have been applied right now as a part of your doctoral research in a particular domain, but tomorrow you can apply them in another domain, and that potential we should not forget. So don't get, disheartened saying that, this is an area I may not be able to find a practical use. For example, the area that I myself invested 5.5 years of my life, I should have been disappointed that no chief minister ever called me for any kind of consultation, right? But the point is that, whether they use my research or not is a separate issue. But for me personally, I have benefited in the form of, the confidence that you develop in terms of having gone through a rigorous program where you develop certain skills which you can port into another domain. And as I mentioned earlier, if you go through a doctoral program, tomorrow what is called as data analytics will not intimidate you. You will say, oh, data analytics, I know how to analyze data, at least to some extent. Then it's just question of learning new techniques or, new applications. So that's how we need to learn this portability of skills. Even our CA program, why many CAs are so successful as even CEOs, because what they have successfully done is that whatever they have learned from our CA programs, rigorous curriculum, they have been able to port into practical life. Now, this is very important. So, portability of our skills, and that can also happen as a part of your doctoral journey. So, I think that's the only additional point, Amit, I wanted to add.
Thank you, sir.